I'm here with Joe Yastrow with Laner Muchin in Chicago. I just want to ask you some questions focused around business development. But before we get into that, if you could do me a favor and just describe your legal background leading up to your current role at the firm.
I've been practicing law since 1978. My entire career has been devoted to representing employers in labor and employment law matters. Always in Chicago is my base of operations. I've been with Laner Muchin virtually all of that period of time.
But tell me a little bit about how you've seen the legal industry change in, say, the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, I think several things. Number one, there's a lot less client loyalty.
Okay.
I think the service that we provide in the minds of the consumers is become much more commoditized. It's much more about price and alternative fee arrangements and other things of that nature. Increasingly, we're just another expense item on somebody's balance sheet, whereas in the past, it was much more about relationships. So I think that, and the fact that the new methods and proliferation of communications has made it much more a national or even international situation than it used to be. So the competition is much more intense than it used to be, because now you're competing with, at least in our business, you're competing with firms coast to coast much more regularly than you might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Okay. And was there, I mean, you've been a business developer and a rainmaker for the majority of your career. I mean, was there a defining moment that you remember getting it and just realizing that developing business was going to be a big part of your future?
It was always clear to me that even before it really crystallized, in some respects, it was clear that the people that brought business to the firms got a certain kind of attention that others didn't, even before it became much more evident in the compensation end of the spectrum.
When you think about the individuals that are interested in growing books of business and making it rain and all that type of thing, is there something that you're typically recommending to them, or that you're talking to them about to help them get to that point?
My father was an avid fisherman, and so I tend to use the fishing analogy quite regularly. And what I basically tell attorneys, particularly the newer, younger attorneys starting out and are thinking in those terms, is to say that nobody ever caught a fish unless they had a line in the water. And so you've got to be doing it, because the fish don't just jump into your house, into your frying pan. And as that becomes a little more sophisticated process, you also have to know where are the best places to fish and what are the best baits. And it's kind of that sort of thing. And so what I tell them is, look, when you first start out, the fish have to know you're fishing. And what I mean by that is that everybody that you know, family members, friends, law school classmates, everybody needs to know what you do and how you could help them if they had a problem that's in your wheelhouse. It's simple-minded, but it's very true. And that process has to be reinforced on a relatively continuing basis, so that when the need arises, people don't forget that that's your thing. Because in many cases, if you're not at top of mind when the problem hits doing what we're doing, then you're going to get missed. We're not just selling a product that sells itself. It's a need that you have to fulfill when the need arises.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the first step.
So, but let me ask about that, though, because I know there are attorneys that I've worked with that are concerned about the line And the line being, I've got friends and family that own businesses or that do things. They need to know what I do, but how do I tell them what I do, and then how do I possibly even get some business from that? And where's the line?
Everybody has their own style, but I think, in fact, if you're going to be successful at marketing something, you have to kind of be willing to be direct. The more obtuse you are, the less likely you are to have any success.
Do you have an example from your own experience of how you did that, how you reached out, targeted some group or company, or reached out? Is there a way that you have done that in the past that you could, there's a little story around that?
One of the things that was preached to me years ago, and it's absolutely true, but it's an important part of understanding who we are and how we reach our potential clients. We kept statistics going way back as to where new clients came from. And it turns out that historically and still today, our firm, because we're highly specialized boutique type firm, we get a lot of referrals of new clients from other lawyers who don't do what we do, and in particular, lawyers who are like corporate lawyers, the general advisor type lawyer whose firms don't have labor and employment law capacity, or have very limited labor and employment law capacity.
So is that really about developing strategic partnerships as kind of a key element?
Yeah, I guess you could call it that, but it's just I would call it, I'm more old-fashioned, so I'd probably call it network. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's just one of the I think the very beneficial things that I do, that we do, is that I have these close relationships with my clients. I have many clients who are on retainers that they pay me a fixed fee. They can call me whenever they want. And over time, we develop these relationships where they rely on me for advice, and it's not always strictly within the confines of my expertise, per se. But both because I have a lot of referrals of services and providers that relate to what I do. Private investigators, drug testing companies, medical professionals, things of that nature. I get those calls.
Okay. But it sounds like another element of this is becoming a kind of a go-to guy for your clients. So when they need an attorney that handles other areas of practice areas, or they need drug testing, or they need these things, that you're the guy that they can call to get those things. So it's more than just you're their lawyer. You're also someone that they can count on for other elements.
I want the ideal perception of a client to have of me is that I'm a problem solver.
Okay.
That's my job. Significant.
So is that, going back to a point you made earlier, is that the big switch between the commoditized legal future and where you are, in the sense that it's hard for someone to leave over money because you have that relationship and you're such a good problem solver? Is that what is going to make a lawyer kind of make it today versus someone who might not be doing that?
I think ultimately the people, the decision makers, if they're the users of the service or they're close to the users of the service, are still looking for relationships. And I think that the intelligent consumer understands that there's a significant benefit to having a relationship with their lawyers and not just hiring a lawyer for a case in an isolated moment in time. Okay? In any given case, that may not be true, but over time, it pays off in efficiencies and understanding the organization, how it operates. Most of what we do is not a one-off situation. Labor relations is an ongoing thing. A lot of times it's analogized to a marriage. And the decision-making is not in isolation. It's not like a real estate transaction where you go off and you develop and you buy a building and you sell it and now you're done.
Okay. So when you look at the future of the attorney, you've got the rainmakers who have just made a rain. You've got the worker bees that love to just sit and do the work. Then there's that middle section of the ones that want to grow a book. What is it going to take for them to? I understand it takes time. They've got to know who and where to go, but. I mean, what are the things that they have to do above and beyond these days to ensure that they have a future and they have, control over their practice?
Well, I think a few things. I think number one is to try to find a niche. No matter how specialized your practice may be, try to find a niche within that. And gain some recognition as an expert, because this society that we live in is always looking for specialists. What's it going to cost me a specialist to do? So to the extent that you're recognized as a specialist in something that can help get attention. Now, I still think there's a danger in getting too highly specialized. Because then obviously you limit your ability to appeal to a broad range.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is one of the ways that you can do it. The next thing, which I think is probably as or more important, is be user-friendly. A lot of lawyers don't realize they're not user-friendly. Okay? Meaning that especially as this field becomes more and more competitive, you have to be accessible when you are needed. You have to be able to answer questions succinctly in a way which a non-lawyer can understand and apply. I think one of the biggest shortfalls I see in attorneys, and it's not just younger attorneys, it's attorneys, is giving advice and being able to have the advice implemented are two very different things. And being a good facilitator of your advice is very, very important and will distinguish you from, other lawyers. In other words, instead of sending a legal memo with detailed, beautifully written analysis, and send the bullet point that says, first do this, then do this, then do this, then you're done. Now, it may be supported by the legal analysis, but that bullet point is way more important than that legal analysis, except for maybe the most sophisticated of general counsels.
Okay.
And I think the other part of user-friendly is always understand the economics of every single matter that you're involved in, and make sure that the advice that you give and the approach that you take factors that in. That doesn't necessarily mean you take the path of least financial resistance. It means that you make sure the client understands the option and the relative costs of those options, so that ultimately they don't wind up surprised that they won a case that was of very little meaning for multiple millions of dollars.
Right. I think that's a big concern for the general business public is, that expectations aren't properly set or always set, and then things get out of hand or things go off the rails a little bit, and then they get huge bills, or the communication isn't quite there. And so I think that addresses that pretty
well. And
clearly.
Kind of a corollary or a related point is be fun to work with. I mean, ultimately, people are going to want to work with people they have fun and enjoy working with. Okay. I'm not saying that means you go to the bleachers to the Cubs game all summer long, but I'm saying that if you have a relationship with the client, that they enjoy talking to you, you tell a joke, once you share stories, whatever it may be, or it's a client you're traveling with. Obviously, if it's like they can't wait to get back to the room because they don't want to hang with you, versus, hey, let's have dinner, let's talk, let's socialize. I'm sorry, but those are very important things, and I think that they help really build up a relationship. And in that, one of the things that I've learned is that, and you have to be a little bit sensitive to how this plays in. People's children are incredibly important to them. And if in the context of a relationship with a client, you show knowledge of and concern about their children, whether it's just asking a question once in a while, how's Jimmy doing at state, or I understand Alex is thinking of going to law school. If he'd like to go to lunch, I'd be happy to talk to him and give him some do's and don'ts. I can't tell you how, and this isn't something that I calculatedly, put on my checklist of things to do, but I just, over time, as I had children, I noticed how big a deal this is.
Yeah.
And it's not to the exclusion of other family members, certainly, but I'm just saying that that's a very, it's a little thing, but it's amazing what a big thing it is.
It's a pretty huge relationship builder, though, to do that. So, listen, Joe, I appreciate your time, and I think there's a lot of information here that will help attorneys to be successful with business development and client relationships. I just want to thank you for your time.